Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Season 6 tier list. We're 6 seasons into this show, and I've been enjoying this journey. I hope you guys are too, and we're going to keep going all the way to Season 20. Anyway, we're going to get into Season 6, kind of go talk about the season, and I feel like to this point, everything's been fairly chalk with my opinions on the show as a whole, and how I view it, and how I think the fandom as a whole views it, but I think this is going to be where I start to deviate a bit from the norm consensus and how I feel about this season. So it'll be interesting to see how people feel. I think this is going to be one that I really want people to engage, so leave a like, comment on the video. Just, I want to hear your opinions about my thoughts on this season, especially just because, you'll see as we get into it. So, without further ado, let's get into Season 6, and we'll start with its first episode. If I can find it, where are you? Where are you? Let's see, yeah, here it is. Salty Secret, which I'm going to start with in the B tier. And I think it's a perfectly fine episode. It's a very interesting season opener. It doesn't feature Thomas or Percy, which is, I believe, the first time the show's really... I guess Grandpuff didn't, but like they both speak in it, and they are in the beginning. So yeah, I mean, this one leads with other characters. Bill, Ben, and Mavis get bigger roles, and we meet Salty, who's a great character. I think this is a fine introduction episode. I think not a lot stands out about it, I would say. I mean, it's other than like the music, I would say, and the singing. I also feel like the episode weirdly ends kind of abruptly, because you go from Salty teaching the twins the song, and they're still kind of mad at him, and then we cut to the Fat Controller coming, and he's, that at that point the twins are relatively calm about Salty. So, I don't know. It is kind of weird how the episode wraps up. Would have been nicer if it had a nicer, wrap up, but yeah. Not much else to say about this one. Our next episode is Harvey to the Rescue, and this is going in D tier. I have a lot of problems with this episode, and you're going to hear me say that a lot with Season 6. With this episode especially, my biggest problem is, I guess, they're not technically the Steam Team yet, because, like, Emily's not in the show, but characters we would consider the Steam Team. So, like, Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, James, Percy. At this point in time, kind of Toby, but he's not in this episode, so we're just talking about the first 6. With the exception of Thomas, they all kind of gang up against Harvey, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. And it's a weird thing that starts to happen, at least I notice it in this season, where the engines get very groupthinky, where if one character doesn't like something or someone, they all pretty much oppose it. I mean, it's nice that, like, Thomas isn't judging Harvey, but, like, weirdly, he's one of the few characters that kind of should. Like, a lot of people like to bring up Thomas's character development in this show, and I'm not entirely sure if it's character development or if it's, like, more just inconsistent writing. Like, they want Thomas to be, like, this friendly neighborhood tank engine, I guess, but they also want him to be cheeky, and sometimes he's arrogant, and there are episodes that better portray him, and then there's other ones that are a little bit all over the place. And this is one of those ones where he's weirdly the straight man here, and everyone else is just really mean to Harvey, especially Edward, which is weird because that comes out of nowhere. And again, it's like one of the first times we start to see Edward out of character, and I don't know, it's just a weird groupthinky thing they start to do this season, and it will continue. But this was the first episode I noticed it. Maybe it happens earlier, but this is the first time I kind of noticed that groupthinky kind of feel, and it doesn't feel right here. And then we're going to bounce back with No Sleep for Cranky, which is one of my favorite Season 6 episodes. This is a very interesting episode, talking about it with people. There are people who I know hate this episode, and there are people who I know love this episode. And I'm obviously in the love it tier. I can understand why people don't like it. Some people call it like, oh, it's torture for Cranky. And I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm kind of okay with that, because Cranky, albeit he's not the nicest character in the show, he bullies other characters, so I kind of like his kind of personal karma is that, oh, you get stuck at the docks with Salty. And I kind of like that Salty's a foil to Cranky. It's a nice development for his character. Builds upon the docks more in this show. And obviously Bill and Ben coming back, and they're nice to Salty here. I think is a nice little... It's kind of growth, and you can see some of these arcs in Season 6 a little bit. So it's a nice little callback. A Bad Day for Harold the Helicopter, I think I'm putting in B tier. It's a pretty fine episode. It's kind of boring. Not a lot happens. It's entertaining with the crash. Oh, I forgot to mention this with Harvey to the Rescue. One of the reasons why I did not end up in F tier is its crash. But A Bad Day for Harold the Helicopter. Nice crash. Nice moments. But again, not a ton this episode. It's nice they pick up the Percy and Harold rivalry. Kind of the first time we visited since... It's brought up briefly in Season 5. But really the first time we focus on it in an episode since Season 3, so that's nice that they call this back. But yeah, pretty solid one. Then we have Elizabeth, if you would get dragged. There we go. Elizabeth the Vintage Lorry is an A tier episode. I do enjoy this one a lot. So this is, to me, Thomas's character. Like, he's not exactly rude to Elizabeth, but he's not the most welcoming. And I think that fits his character more. And I think that ultimately Thomas... This is more how he should be characterized. He's still cheeky, he gets angry, he's a bit judgmental, but I don't think it's anything too crazy here, and I think it fits. Fogman is one of my favorite episodes of Season 6, if you know me. On this rewatch, I can't quite put in an S tier. There are episodes that I will put in S tier. So I think it goes upper A tier. Season 6 starts off reasonably strong here. And you get a really nice episode about Thomas, Percy, and Toby. I don't know really where this is supposed to be. I know it's like Misty Valley, which I don't know where that is. I don't know where it is in the context of the TV series. But it's, I guess, somewhere on Thomas's branch line. But I don't know, I do like the concept of this episode. Fat Controller's a little bit weird, and this is the first time I'll kind of mention it. The Fat Controller this season is weirdly strict, and this is kind of a weird action for him to undergo. I don't entirely hate it, but it is kind of weird to see the Fat Controller, who we see in Season 5 is like not the most like he's a very firm character, but fair, and he's flawed, but this season he feels very stern, and there's an episode in particular we'll discuss that with. And then we get into something interesting. So, obviously people know about Jack of the Pack and that spin-off, so we get kind of the pilot of Jack in the Pack in Season 6 with a two-parter. And we start off with Jack Jumps In, which I think is a solid B-tier episode. I think I'm going to put it here. I hate the large-scale Thomas's face. I just think that it's kind of creepy. It's got this big dopey smile on it. It's just weird. I don't know why they thought that was okay. Thankfully they fixed it for when they did the actual Jack in the Pack spinoff, which we will watch too. We'll be watching that after we're done Season 7. Anyway, so... But yeah, nice introductory episode. A lot of the episode is basically, hi, I'm Jack. Hi, I'm blank, and the other characters. And we get Jack's accident, which is nice. So not a ton happens. It's more just introducing the pack, which is fine. A Friend in Need is a really good follow-up story, and I think this one... Is it S tier worthy? It's so close. I think I'm going to put it in an A tier. It's very close to S tier. I think I like the Fogman more, but I do like that we directly follow the episode. It's been a while since we've had like a two-parter in terms of like a direct, like this is directly after an episode, this builds off of it. So it's nice to get one again, a nice two-part episode of Thomas and Jack. We get to see that friendship, we get to meet more of the pack, and this one feels more like, okay, now we're telling more of a story, where the first one is we're introducing characters and just having like moments. Let's see. It's Only Snow for me is a B tier episode. Maybe it's just because I watched this episode a lot as a kid, because it aired a lot on like Sprout and whatnot. It's a fine episode, but a lot of it is just Thomas and Toby traveling. It is kind of cool that Thomas pushes Snow aside. Realistic? No, but I'm fine with that. It's a fine episode. It's not my favorite winter episode of this season, but it's a pretty solid entry. And then we get to Twin Trouble. And this episode is going in F tier for me. I am not a fan of Donald and Douglas arguing. I'm fine with most other characters arguing, and I'm fine with Donald and Douglas arguing with other characters. But the twins should never argue with each other. Like, they were almost separated from one another, and they were facing death. And to just say that they could still there's one other time in the show that they argue that I'm okay, this is fine, because it's mostly banter arguing, and that's in Castle Lock. I haven't watched that episode again yet, but I've seen it enough times to remember it. So, it's fine, because it's a very brief, like, bantery kind of argument. But this is, like, a serious argument, and Douglas is especially mean in this episode, and it just feels very mean-spirited. And a lot of this episode, I think, creates problems for the characters later on in the show, especially in the Brenner era, with their appearances in Season 20 and Season 21. It feels like they watched this episode and say, oh, Donald and Douglas argue, and then that's why we have Love Me Tender and Emily in the Middle, I cannot talk tonight, Emily in the Middle, where the twins basically argue for the whole episode. And it just doesn't feel right to their character. So, unfortunately, I'm not a huge fan of it, so I'm going to give this episode F tier. The World's Strongest Engine for me is C tier. It's a fine episode. Not a ton happens. It's just weirdly, okay, Diesel. It's kind of like Pop Goes the Diesel again. I don't know. It feels weirdly out of character for Diesel. It doesn't feel like he's scheming. He's just kind of doing something stupid because he can. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's about it. I don't really have much to say. A lot of Season 6 I feel like just lacks a lot of substance. Feels very dry bones, very bare bones, and because of that, a lot of the episodes... It's not a bad episode, there's just nothing really in this episode that I'm like, ooh, this is like a thing to come back from. Like, everything in A and B tier, there's like moments in the episode that I think, oh yeah, that's worth rewatching. And the stuff in D and F has a lot of things that I just don't like. Like, there's really nothing in Twin Trouble I like. Harvey to the Rescue at least has, like, a good crash. This episode isn't really bad, it just doesn't really have anything that I'm like, ooh, that's a really cool moment. But we get our first S-tier episode of the season, and that's Scaredy Engines. And another example of an episode where Thomas is characterized pretty well here. He's cheeky to Percy, he makes fun of him, and he finally gets his just desserts when he's scared, and he runs away from the scrapyard. It's a great episode. All three characters are nicely in character. It's a good episode. It feels like a full story. It doesn't just feel like kind of stuff happening for 4.5 minutes. So, I prefer that. And maybe this season was just very good at scary episodes, but I am going to put Percy and the Haunted Mine in A tier. There is some logic in the episode that doesn't make sense. Why are trucks full of gnomes waiting by an abandoned mine? I don't know. It's kind of plot convenience. But, yeah, we get a really cool, scary episode that's a lot of fun. The effect of the mines collapsing is crazy. And it is a pretty scary episode when you don't really fully understand what's happening. So, yeah, props to the team on the effects here. Really good effects, and really fun episode to watch. And then we get Middle Engine, which is another one that a lot of people argue about. Is it good? Is it not? And I'm putting it in C tier. I just think it's kind of meh. Like, I've got my problems with it. There's brief moments I kind of like, but it's just kind of weird. Like, the Fat Controller scolding Percy for something he has absolutely nothing to do with. I don't know. It's C tier. It's just kind of... It's not bad. It's not... Like, when the trucks are shunted in front of Percy, couldn't Percy just reshunt his train? Like, why does he have to be a middle engine? In James, it's because he's stubborn, which is weirdly contrived, but okay. I don't know. It's just... I could put it lower, but I don't think there's anything really wrong. It's just kind of a bleh episode. James in the Red Balloon, I think, is going to go in upper B tier. I I wouldn't say I never liked this episode. I always thought this was kind of a meh episode, but rewatching it, it is kind of funny, the dynamic that Thomas and James have. It's just the two of them being idiots about this red balloon, thinking this red balloon is, like, gonna ruin their lives. Which, I don't know, I kind of find that funny. There's not a ton of story here, but, again, it's a solid episode. It's entertaining. I love the part that they're both, like, Thomas is upset that James saves the balloon, and James is upset that he saves it too. But, you know, it's a fine episode. I think B tier suits it. Jack Frost is gonna go in S tier. I enjoy this Christmas. It's like winter holiday Christmassy story. I enjoy it. I love Jack Frost Percy. It's kind of an iconic moment of the franchise that he gets that look. And, you know, I like that. There's been a lot of, in these last few episodes, it's been a lot of James and Percy appearing. So it's interesting that those two characters got so much feature this season. But, you know, it's a good episode between the two of them. Nice for them to share the spotlight. Much better than the last time they had to share the spotlight. Gordon takes a tumble. I think this episode will go in A tier. I think it's an overall pretty solid Gordon plot. I enjoy this episode quite a bit. I love the crash. It's over the top, but it's a pretty solid episode. Percy's Chocolate Crunch is an iconic episode, and I kind of will put it in B tier. I think a lot of what this episode has going for it is the crash, because before then it's just Percy getting dirty. I don't know. It's a fun... I think the episode, like, the hype and the marketing around this episode, especially because how much they've, like, milked the Chocolate Percy, like, how much merchandise that has been made of it, like, I don't know. It's a fine episode, I guess. Buffer Bother is a better version of Twin Trouble. I just find this episode very boring. Again, just kind of a story. I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me, I guess. It's not bad. Maybe just because the whole thing takes place at the quarries, it's kind of a dull scenery thing, but I don't know. This episode is just kind of It's just Bill mad the entire episode that Ben gets new buffers and then he finally has the same accident. But literally this episode is plot for, like, literally the same plot as Twin Trouble. Down to, like, even the crash being nearly identical. And Mavis plays Duck Swole, which I'll talk about Duck in this season in a bit, in a future episode, but I have interesting thoughts about how Duck's used in Season 6. Our next story is Toby Had a Little Lamb, which I'm going to put in B tier. Again, it's an episode that I think should be way more intense and heart-pounding, and it just feels underplayed. The situation, it's just kind of... That's the thing, like, I feel like I'm saying the same stuff again and again, but Season 6 is just kind of meh. Where when it's... There's good, there's bad, there's bleh. I mean, there's not a ton of, like, really great episodes compared to Season 5. There's mostly a lot of B, C, there's some A. I don't know. Thomas, Percy, and the Squeak. Like, again, it's another just kind of it's there episode. Thomas is in character. There's nothing really wrong, but, like, there's some good lines from Gordon, and I hate the pleasant lines, or the peasant/pleasant line is taken out in the US dub, but, again, like, it's just not a lot of substance here. It's kind of a forgettable episode. So, yeah. But we get one more episode that will end up in the S tier, if I can actually pick it up. There we go. Is Thomas and the Jet Engine, which was really fun to rewatch. This episode had a lot of energy. This almost feels like a leftover Season 5 script. So, it's kind of fun to see this episode. It's a wacky adventure Thomas has. So many iconic moments. I love this episode a lot, too, because when I was a kid, I got the Thomas and the Jet Engine pack in Wooden Railway, and at my preschool, it was actually kind of fun. We had a bunch of kids there that were also into Thomas and Wooden Railway, and, well, Thomas in general. And there was this one kid there who, like, you know, we always used to reenact this episode with, where we had Like, he would bring his Thomas, and I would bring, like, the jet engine and Gordon, and we would recreate the scene of Thomas passing Gordon. And it was just a funny moment to just keep replaying in our heads again and again and again. It was just, I don't know, when an episode has that much, like, it has that much sticking power, it still has, like, they still make merchandise of it from time to time. They reference it in, like, Extraordinary Engines while giving Thomas a jet engine again. What is that what it's called? Whatever the Marvelous Machinery, that's it. Jesus, I was way off. But yeah, really iconic episode, really fun episode. I think it belongs in S tier. Edward the Really Useful Engine is a pretty hotly debated one. I fall in a group that I kind of really enjoy this one. I think I'm going to put it in A tier. I think this episode was... I can understand the problems people have with it. I just... Again, I'm not with the whole idea of the characters being developed, because the problem is, if you view it from the... Like, if you look from, like, seasons 1 and 2, the characters, a lot of them finish their plot arcs by the end of, like, season 2 into, like, season 3, because their stories from, like, a majority of the Railway series are told at that point. So, where do you take the characters from there? Which is why the show kind of has to change things up and add things to the characters in, like, season 3 and 4 and 5. So... Can Gordon and the others turn on Edward? Yeah, that's within their character to do so. Like, yes, Edward's exploits happen, but the way the TV series works, I mean, who's to say this didn't happen before Edward's exploit? There's nothing in this episode that suggests it didn't. The characters who were present in this episode were all present at the time of Edward's exploit. So, I'm just saying, we don't know. And I think this kind of is an interesting episode, too, because to me, it's like the closest they came to adapting Super Rescue. And it's a pretty fine adaptation of said episode. You know, but that being said, it is interesting how this episode uses Duck, and really this season. Duck's put in a lot of roles that make him look kind of weak, for lack of a better term. And I don't know why. It just kind of is a weird thing that happens. Like in this episode, he's kind of a pawn in the Fat Controller's scheme to make Edward look good. And then you have... you have in Toby Had a Little Lamb, like he can't get through the snow, and you have in Middle Engine, he's like used as an example as a middle engine. You have Twin Trouble, he's in the middle of the fight. So weirdly enough, outside of Scaredy Engines, Duck's not really been put in the best position a lot of the time this season. Duncan's a solid B tier episode, nothing too crazy. I would probably put it around here. It's fine. There might be a couple episodes in B tier I might move down, maybe one at the end of this video, but it's a fine episode. Again, I do not like the way the Scaredy Railway is used this season, especially because it just feels so empty. And again, Duncan's characterized very well here. Rusty, Rheneas, and Scaredy all just kind of have a hive mind of like Duncan's wrong, which they should, but it just... They don't feel like characters, they're just kind of like, oh yeah, Duncan's wrong. Like, they're just kind of plot machines. And I don't know, Season 6's writing at times does feel stilted, where a character will say something like, yeah, that character will say something like that, but the way it's written, it just doesn't sound like it. It's hard to explain. But it's a fine episode, nothing real too crazy about it. Rusty Saves the Day is the worst episode. It might be the worst episode of the whole classic series. I might be hyperbolic, but it doesn't make sense. And there's a lot of aspects of it that if they changed like things here and there, it might be like a really good one. The Fat Controller basically decides to shut down the Scaredy Railway and make them work at a quarry, in which then they can go nowhere because they have no line to ship the stone, because the line's closed because it's under disrepair, and he's mad at Rusty for doing his job of repairing the line. So I don't know what the Fat Controller's obsession is with the quarry. This episode is just bad. It's one of the worst. It's terrible. And kind of the epitome of, like, why the Fat Controller's not a great character this season. And then we have Faulty Whistles, which is just kind of a meh episode. Like, it's a fun concept with the organ, but nothing too crazy. And that's pretty much Season 6. So, pretty much we're higher on the B tier. There is some good episodes here, but I do feel like there is kind of a gap. I do feel like I'm going to move A Bad Day for Harold the Helicopter down a tier. So, I'm debating if any other episode really should move down. I think the others are fine. I think that's pretty much it, though. I mean, this is just kind of a mess season to me. It's not terrible. It's just not that great. And that's why I think it might be one of the, it might be my least favorite classic season. There's a few good episodes, but a lot of the episodes are kind of in the, alright, they're a little better than average, or the meh. And then you have some pretty bad episodes down here. I mean, you have as many, bad episodes as you have, great episodes, and that's not really what you want in a season. It's a very bleh season. The good doesn't necessarily outweigh the bad. There's just a lot of, and even the episodes in A tier. If we were comparing this to, Season 4, Season 5, I feel like there'd be way more, these, and compared to those episodes, a lot of them would fall into, a B tier. And the B tiers would go into, a C tier. And the C tier would probably stay in C tier. Some might go into D. And it's just one of those things, the quality of this season is much lower than it was in years past. And I don't know why, but it is. So, with that, we'll wrap up this tier list. We'll be on to Season 7, then Jack in the Pack, and Season 8, and so on from there. Yeah. Other than that, this is Cranky James signing off. Have a nice evening, everyone.